And that is why today, the Spectacular Spider-Man, the series here, we meet Peter Parker. He is a 16-year-old kid who lives around fighting crime, wearing a spider costume, etc., etc.
He is just a costumed clown.
Just like in almost all faithful adaptations of the character. Here we have those same old problems. Peter Parker no uncle has financial problems.
Poor.
Is a student who suffers bullying. Has a friend named Harry and a friend until then. Only a friend named Gwen, and of course his love interest, who here primarily is this irrelevant character who dumps him.
What did you think that I would go out with the champion of the high school idiots?
Despite all that, Parker is a brilliant student. As a reward, he gets an unpaid internship together with Gwen at Dr. Connor's laboratory. Who also works in this laboratory is Eddie Brock, who is also a friend of Pete since childhood and will be one of the most important characters of this cartoon. Well, apart from these nice people here, we will also follow several other characters, and among them are J.K. Simmons as the owner of the Daily Bugle.
The one who knows about selling papers. You are a boy worse, you are a teenager. Jameson Security, get this whining kid away from me by the way here.
Jameson is crazier than ever. Norman Osborn as Harry's father and rich scientist.
If you never achieve at anything when you were young, who will believe you invented technological flight after you were old Aunt?
Come on, walk fast. You don't want to arrive late on the first day.
Flash is Parker's main bully and Spider-Man's biggest fan.
He is my biggest fan, and that is quite sad, Liz.
As Flash's dumb girlfriend.
If you want to raise your grade, you will need tutoring, and I recommend Peter for that.
And etc. throughout everything. We will meet a bunch more characters and mainly villains in Connor's laboratory. We also meet Max, a normal guy who, upon being electrocuted and coming into contact with electric eels, turns yellow and gains electricity powers. Instead of dying, firstly, Max does not have in mind becoming a supervillain. However, he goes out on the street exploring things, unintentionally goes after Connors wanting a cure at any cost, and ends up being defeated by Spider-Man. Meanwhile, Parker's personal life is a mess. Peter has no money, gets made fun of at school, but at least has someone to defend him at the internship.
Move, Geekette, or you're next.
Please, you haven't got the game.
Things were at least going well for some because guess what? Dr. Connors, by using a formula involving Lizard, manages to regenerate his right arm. Everyone then got highly enthusiastic, thinking that the doctor is going to win a Nobel Prize.
Prêmio Nobel, Otto. Prêmio Nobel.
However, he did not count on the fact that instead of a prize, he was going to win a badass lizard skin.
Prêmio Nobel, Otto. Prêmio Nobel.
Since lizards are dumb and violent, the animal starts attacking everyone, and then Spidey enters the action, and here we have a badass battle. By the way, the action scenes of this cartoon are beautiful. This battle extends to the bottom of a lake, and then with the help of Eddie, who is a participatory character as hell, Spider-Man wins, applies an antidote to the lizard, and he again turns back to being Dr. Connors. The problem is that during this fight, Parker took some photos to get a job at the Bugle, and seeing all this, the people at the lab get a little angry at him for always disappearing. At times, they need him and kind of taking advantage of the situation to take these photos instead of helping.
But I can't trust you. You're fired.
Fired?
Please, I need the job.
You are fired.
Little do they know that the one who was throwing down and who helped the most in all this was Spider-Boy himself anyway, feeling like crap. Pete still takes an antidote to remove his powers. However, upon seeing a photo of Uncle Ben, he decides not to do that, meaning he is a 16-year-old boy, but full of responsibilities.
So what if nobody threw a parade? Spidey stays because Spidey's needed. For now, anyway.
The next day, Parker goes to Harry's house to help the kid. And here we see that the upbringing Norman gives him is not that decent.
Well, at least you're making progress.
He despised you. You were an embarrassment to him.
And although Peter does everything to help him, it is not always that he will be able to help him, because Spider-Man is a busy hero. Harry, however, does not know that Pete is Spidey. So he always gets angry when Parker leaves him hanging.
You dropped the ball, Peter.
I know, Harry, I am useless, but
nothing, you are hopeless.
Meaning this Harry is kind of traumatized. As for the father, Norman, he is not a supervillain. At least for now. However, the guy has no scruples and does everything to make money. Everything from stealing ideas from others to making a partnership with this Kingpin to create supervillains. Kingpin, the one who does not show his face to anyone but always keeps sending goons to kill Spidey. Well, for now, it doesn't matter so much. The next day at school, Harry ends up kind of making peace with Pete, and together the two go to participate in the tryouts for the school football team. And why am I saying this? Is it important? Not really, but man, the way this series balances Parker's personal life with the life as a superhero is done damn well, because despite everything, he is just a boy.
He is just a boy. The age of my son.
Well, the two end up doing well in the tryouts. However, there was only one spot as a substitute and one as a starter. And who is the coach thinking of putting as a starter? That is right, Peter. And who is the reserve? That is right, Harry. Meanwhile, Kingpin's partnership with Norman Osborn has its first creation. Flint Marko, a thief bandit who upon being exposed to this stuff ends up becoming a Sandman, and a scene that as a child gave me nightmares. Soon the villain then goes after Spidey, and again, I repeat, the fight scenes here are very badass. Spidey first gets beaten up, but later wins by throwing cement on him. And at the end of this same episode, Parker kind of gets a heavy conscience for having passed the football test, using his powers, and decides to leave the spot to Harry. Well, Norman and Kingpin, parallel to this, continue creating supervillains. And the second one they end up creating is him, Rhino, among all Spider-Man villains. I always found this one of the weirdest anyway. Rhino, upon finding out that Peter takes photos of Spidey, ends up going to the Daily Bugle. And here, my friends, we see that despite being crazy, Jameson is not a bad guy.
I don't know him, nor do I know his address. We only make contact by email.
Peter soon hides and Spidey appears, and then they start. The fight that I am not going to repeat is badass, because everyone already knows it is badass. And finally, Spidey ends up defeating the villain by dehydration. Yes, dehydration, because that armor of Rhino is kind of impenetrable. So the guy has difficulty drinking water after being defeated. Spidey manages to extract from Rhino the information of the last name of this so-called Kingpin, and then searching Spider invades a house and ends up meeting this citizen called Tombstone, who gives a shove to our boy and says, "Look, friend, as long as you continue defeating our enemies, we will send more enemies, so do you want to resolve everything at once? Come work with us." Obviously, the good sense of our hero speaks louder, despite him not having money, and he refuses. And then who appears around here next is the police wanting to arrest Spidey for invasion of privacy, meaning he flees. However, from here on, we have that police dilemma of, is Spidey a villain or a hero? Parallel to all this, life as Peter Parker goes well, but not that well, because the school dance is coming and Parker is without a date. Firstly, he tries to ask Betty, a woman who works at the Daily Bugle. However, she gets indecisive about accepting or not, and to screw everything up once and for all, Aunt May goes there to say that she is too old for Pete. Meanwhile, who feels like asking him is Gwen. However, since Peter Parker does not catch on to the ideas, he does not realize that she likes him, meaning she likes him. But he sees her only as a friend and nothing more. However, rejoice, because Aunt May unfolds the chat, our boy and date. Nothing more, nothing less, and nothing more than you are, Mary Jane Watson, admit it.
Admita, bonitão. Você tirou a sorte grande.
Tiger, you hit the jackpot. This dance is all delicious. It is all delicious. Gwen ends up going with Eddie. Harry ends up getting a date. However, when Peter arrives with MJ, Harry gets a little bit of envy. Gwen gets sad because Pete did not go with her. And summarizing, no one believes that Park or took a gorgeous woman like that to the dance during this party. Harry gets even more frustrated because the girl he took ends up making peace with her ex-boyfriend, Big Guy. So he runs out and drinks a potion from Oscorp because no one knows quite what it is to take all this. Who shows his face around here for the first time is him, Green Goblin, who gathers some petty thieves and invades a fancy party, looking for the Kingpin. Actually, this goblin here is wonderful.
Eu não sei quem o senhor é, mas eu...
É claro que não! É por isso que eu uso máscara! Esperto, não é?
Who by coincidence is at this party is Jameson, who calls the police, and of course also sends for Peter to take photos of everything. Unfortunately, then even without having given a little kiss, Parker ends up leaving MJ aside and goes to brawl against the Goblin. The fight starts, and Spidey even manages to trap the Goblin. However, he cannot see who the villain is because the Goblin left a bomb at the party, and Spidey needed to go to save everyone things, then in the end turn out right. And finally, Pete even returns to the party and dances with Mary Jane the next day. Spidey returns to fighting crime and making reference to classic movies. Ha ha, I understood, huh? And meanwhile, in personal life, it is the following. Parker is kind of eager. So he goes to hit on Mary Jane and she says, "Wait there, we just went to the dance together, but we are just friends," who takes advantage to get closer to him. After that is Liz, who, if you don't remember dates, flash, so place your bets. Will we have Peter Parker, Mr. Steal Your Girl here? I hope so very much.
It is all delicious.
Meanwhile, at Oscorp we meet now Dr. Octavius, a citizen who works for Norman, who while doing an experiment ends up being sabotaged by the Green Goblin, who activates a machine when it wasn't supposed to activate, and consequently, leaving Octavius crazy octopus, then ends up attacking Norman because Norman treated him badly, and Spider-Man appears to help. And by the way, in the middle of this fight, we even have a scene where Spidey breaks the fourth wall.
You never shut that mouth.
Sorry.
No.
My fans expect a certain dose of irony in all battles.
But all this leads to nothing, at least for now. The other day, Gwen ends up finding Harry lying on the floor. How weird. And later, Harry demonstrates that he has much more strength than normal. How weird. Soon she goes to talk to Parker about their friend. However, Parker does not give much importance because he is kind of occupied trying to steal other people's girlfriends. It is all delicious. The problem is that who attacks again here is Otto, who is after a power source, but then Spidey goes after him. They fight, and finally Spidey wins at the end of this same episode. Flash ends up breaking. G up with Liz and they say, who knows, who is the culprit of all this? That is right, Peter Parker. Mr. Steal Your Girl parallel to all this. Harry still continues taking those potions and gets increasingly weird.
Eu tiro notas altas. Sou o melhor jogador. Sou popular, tudo graças a isso.
Harry, não!
However, for now, this does not matter, because there are two more important things. The first, that the Goblin is attacking everyone and stealing things from Oscorp. Meaning, if Norman is not the Goblin, who is the Goblin? Could it be that Norman is the Goblin? It started to get interesting, and the second is that at school a costume party happens. Pete goes dressed as Spidey and Liz drops this one.
Very cool. You can shoot your web at me whenever you want.
Pete, it started to get interesting. That is her king. My friend, you can call me the spectacular ladies' man. The problem is that who appears near this party is the Goblin, so Spidey goes after him, and here happens a fight that is very badass, bro. The best of the series so far. There is a part where the Goblin throws Spidey from high up, and to not take the impact of the fall, Spider wraps himself all up with webs. I cannot see a scene like this being reproduced by any live-action Spider, but here in cartoon it is very badass. Well, the Green Goblin ends up leaving, and then suspecting that the Goblin is Norman because he is using Oscorp equipment, Spidey goes to his house after the crazy guy. And here we discover that the Green Goblin is nothing more, nothing less, and nothing more than, from what it seems, Harry is the Goblin. However, not even he believes that he is the Goblin, because the green substance that he was taking causes dependency, gives strength, and also a certain type of madness that one moment you know who you are, and another you don't. The fact is that Spidey promises Norman not to report Harry, and Norman promises to do everything to help his son.
Please, he is my only son.
And my best friend. The Goblin will disappear forever, leaving a mystery that will never be deciphered.
The story here then continues, and in the following episode, NASA finds a species of alien life in space and ends up sending it to Dr. Connor's laboratory. Since Parker is kind of forbidden to enter in there, he decides to go secretly to see the stuff. However, there is already another person who went secretly, not just to see, but to steal the stuff. Black Cat.
My name is Black Cat, and cats do not fight with spiders. We finish them off.
The problem is that in the middle of the fight, the symbiote ends up falling and sticking precisely to Spidey's foot, so Black Cat flees. Peter does not realize and thinks that everything is fine. However, everything is bad. Soon Parker realizes that he is more agile and stronger than ever, and soon realizes that he has the symbiosis on his body. However, instead of returning it, the alien begins to consume him, and he thinks, screw it, I am not going to return it. What harm is there? Parallel to all this, an imposter is using Spidey's costume and cheap tricks to pass himself off as him and rob banks. And then Peter with the symbiote on his body goes after the guy and initiates here a badass battle.
You are not even wearing the right clothes.
I am in mourning for your burial case.
With the help of the Catwoman herself, who did this to take advantage of the situation and steal some jewels, the real Spidey wins. And then we discover that the imitator is this citizen named Chameleon. But it does not matter, because the coolest thing is that the spectacular ladies man gives a kiss on Black Cat at the end of the episode.
This is very good.
Things then follow, and a day later we see that a bunch of villains defeated previously by Spider-Man joined up and escaped from prison. Meanwhile, in Peter Parker's personal life, Eddie is angry with him, because for him, Parker is just an exploiter. However, for now, this does not matter so much because all the villains together go after Spidey. And now, yes, ask the musicians to play an action theme because things are going to get ugly. This fight. My friend is sinister and alone. Spider manages to violently defeat all the villains parallel to this. We have a big problem here because guess what? As Spider-Man, everything is beauty. Despite Peter having become more violent because of the symbiote. But as Peter Parker, things are going bad because Aunt May goes to feel sick and ends up having a heart attack, and Eddie gets increasingly pissed at Pete. The Aunt May thing actually does not end up so bad. However, the hospital bill is high. Very high. So Parker goes to school full of problems in his head, and together the symbiote that worsens his personality a lot. He rejects everyone from school, who was trying to console him, and goes to Kingpin's goon in search of money. The bandit then says, "Beauty, you want to work for us? Prove it. Stay there a week without fighting crime." Spidey then agrees and follows his life parallel to this. Due to the disappearance of the symbiote, Eddie ends up losing his job at Dr. Connor's laboratory, so he again gets a little tantrum at Parker, but this time, Pete does not let it slide. Shut your mouth.
I am full of your complaints. I already said you are wanting peace.
Church, after this heap of things, Pete starts to get real, and upon realizing that he is becoming a big jerk with everyone thinks this damn suit, I am going to take it off. However, the symbiote enters his mind in a way that is beautiful but confusing. Uncle Ben Dead vs. Symbiote has a fight in Parker's subconscious to decide what the kid is going to do. Then the symbiote stays with the clothes, and the ghost of Uncle Ben speaks. "No, Peter, you are doing shit, take off those clothes." Meaning it is an internal conflict inside Peter's own head that in the end, Ben ends up winning. And Peter Parker says goodbye.
Symbiosis case closed.
The problem is that this slime ends up going to stop on Eddie himself, who learns through the symbiosis that Parker as Spidey creates even more anger at Peter because of this, seeing that he only lost his job because Spidey took the symbiosis, and already with the stuff on his body decides to go after Ree.
"Venge, you are screwed, son of a bitch, when I catch you. You are screwed, I am going to catch you, son of a whore."
I never thought he would do this.
Meanwhile, Parker is now chilling. So he goes to Kingpin's goon to say that he does not want to have more involvement with any of that, makes peace with his friends, including Gwen, gets all excited when she sees him, and ha 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 ha. Happiness. The problem is that Eddie attacks Spidey for the first time. And here it is, crazy. My brother seeing this buffed Venom is very cool. Firstly, Venom says that Parker did not suffer enough, that it would be too easy to finish him so fast. So he goes after the people Peter loves, meaning Aunt May, Gwen, etc., etc. A thing very out of this version is that Pete and Eddie were friends since childhood. Their parents died together in a plane crash while Parker had his uncle and aunt to give all the support he needed. Eddie had no one. So when he joins the symbiosis, he kind of finds a refuge. A friend even not being a friend. And this is badass. What matters is that the beatdown there already begins, and guess just what the daring Spidey does?
I am nothing without you. Take me back. Is that what you want? Isn't it a union with the first love?
Yes, he offers himself to the symbiosis. It lets go of Eddie, and when it sticks on Parker, he says, "Haha, not here, buddy," things then end up ending. Well, Spidey manages to trap the symbiosis and finally buries it in cement, case closed, back home. We realize that Aunt May is already fine. Everything goes well, and guess what that is? that you can call me the spectacular ladies man. Indeed. The problem is that after that little kiss, Peter and Gwen keep staring at each other, but Parker gets kind of ashamed to speak the truth. And meanwhile, who takes ad? Vantage to approach Parker is Liz, parallel to this. Also, one of the villains who is terrorizing the crowd here is him, Mysterio, who appears acting like a badass wizard, defeats Spidey for the first time. But after that, Parker realizes that everything is illusion and manages to defeat the villain using spider sense that my friend is very badass. Later, who shows his face around here is a certain Sergei Haha. The guy's name is Sergei, a very cool Russian who goes after Spider-Man to see if he lets him be. Sergei. Okay, I am a little retarded, but screw it. Actually, the guy goes after Spidey because he seeks a worthy opponent, better motivation. There isn't, so they meet, have a very badass fight. However, Sergei loses and says, no, I lost my honor. I want a rematch. So he goes to a doctor-scientist and says, Doctor, give me powers. And then the doctor injects some stuff in him and makes him transform into this species of human lion. Soon he goes for the rematch against Pete, however ends up losing again and disappears days later. A citizen who does not show his face but everyone knows as Master Planner gathers a bunch of old enemies to attack Spider-Man during this entire episode, so lots of frenetic beatdown happens. But finally, no one manages to beat the daring boy in the following episode. We discover then that the so-called Master Planner is Dr. Octopus himself. I think you can't understand very well what he wants, but it is something like conquering the world. Spider-Man obviously tries, and they manage to stop all this. And now let's leave for Peter's personal life. What is going on there first, that he does not know if he likes Gwen or Liz? So a good part of the cartoon passes a kind of love triangle to see who stays with Pete. And my god, poor Gwen. She spends most of the cartoon bay, Nung Put as a backup by Parker.
You barely spoke to me since you know when. And I understood, okay, I am not your first choice, but I am also not going to be your second.
Who ends up having courage first and managing to date Pete is Liz. So everyone at school is gossiping. And another character who returns to classes is him or nobody.
Oh, Harry, is it you?
And hey, Peter. Look, man, that wasn't quite what I was expecting.
Harry then spends most of the time in this episode hitting on Gwen and finally manages to date her. And then what does Peter do? Gets jealous that...
Taste of strawberry.
However, for now, this also does not matter because another character who was missing and ends up returning here is Eddie, who ends up discovering where Spidey buried the symbiosis, and again returns to being Venom parallel to this Jameson's son, who is an astronaut, gains a certain type of weird power, and in the beginning starts helping people. But then he starts getting crazier and crazier and ends up being defeated by Spider-Man. The problem in all this is that after receiving a discharge of electricity, he went crazy, and then Jameson put all the blame on Spider-Man, and then Venom takes advantage of this situation and reveals to Jameson that Peter is Spidey.
Peter Parker is Spider-Man.
You are no good, Brock.
The people here then start to investigate Parker. To investigate everyone Parker knows, including in a scene he is fleeing from reporters, ends up hiding with Gwen in the corner, and almost betrayal happens from both parts. The guy wants to shoot webs at everyone. Well, Venom to make Pete's life become a hell. Tries at any cost to prove to everyone that Peter Parker is Spidey. However, again, after losing a fight, Eddie loses the symbiosis, gets committed to a psychiatric clinic, and Peter Parker is cleared of being Webhead. Well, time passes and the story continues, and at a certain moment, Flash ends up discovering that Harry used that type of drug to do well in games, and ends up telling everyone because despite having won titles, stolen titles make no sense. Harry then kind of gets down, after a crowd from school starts treating him badly, and then guess what this prick does stays again? Thinking about taking the little green medicine parallel to this. In Parker's personal life, Liz gets angry for noticing that he gives some strange looks to Gwen. However, they kind of make peace and stay in this mess. I can't take this decision of Parker anymore. My god friend, choose soon who you want to be with anyway. A day later, who appears around here again, is the goblin who threatens a crowd here. And therein assumes the quote-unquote position of Kingpin, because from what it seems the real Kingpin is not going to appear in this series. The Goblin then takes this guy who is Liz's brother and makes Norman create another supervillain this time. A villain who transforms into fire as Molten Man. He is not a bad guy. He does not want to kill Spider-Man, at least for the time being. However, he is forced by the Goblin goes to brawl. But even so, loses the fight and ends up being arrested, leaving our Dear Liz sad. The story then continues, and the next day Norman, for some reason, ends up calling Spider-Man to test the security of a prison for supervillains. What do you want with this? Norman suspicious? See, Spidey ends up managing to escape from the maximum security prison, and then he ends up passing through another prison where there are a bunch of villains arrested by him previously, and the Goblin takes the opportunity to sabotage everything, releasing all these villains with Spider-Man still inside, who also ended up entering this prison to release her father, who was arrested was Black Cat. So since she is already in there anyway, she ends up helping Pete to defeat the guys and flee from that place. The problem is that Black Cat's father is nothing more, nothing less, nothing more than the guy who killed Uncle Ben, and then he himself, recognizing his mistake, decides to end up staying in prison.
Indeed, I committed a horrible mistake the night I took the life of Ben Parker, and I know I have to pay for my mistake.
That does not make us even. You are not forgiven.
Understand. Black Cat, on the other hand, gets angry at Spidey for this, but who cares, one enemy more or less, whatever. Parallel to this at school, a play is happening, and Pete promised Liz that he would go to this play, but he goes, no, because it wasn't even possible, right? Damn, anyway, she gets a little hurt, but all right. For now, the next day, who appears at Gwen's house to ask for help is Harry. So she calls Parker, and here Harry reveals that he did not stay missing because he was doing shenanigans as Goblin, but rather that he disappeared because someone in the Goblin's clothes kidnapped him. Who could it have been? Harry, after this revelation, ends up going home. And it is here that, alone with Gwen, the daring boy takes the opportunity to have the talk.
Look, if you don't feel the same, I am
Peter. I have been in love with you since 7th grade. No. Behind Harry's or Liz's back?
Well, she accepts but says that first she has to break up with Harry and he with Liz if it were up to Pete. I am sure that he would stay with Gwen, not counting the other one. The problem is that who heard all this story was Harry, who gets an evil face. So here it is, very cool, the fact of the episode playing with the fact of the Goblin's identity. Who is the Goblin Norman or Harry Spidey, then starts to investigate, starts some suspicions here and there. And finally we discover that the original Green Goblin is him, Norman Osborn, who reveals that Harry was never the Goblin, but that he framed his own son to not end up being caught.
Do you know how much I sacrificed?
And here, yes, the super final battle begins in which Spider-Man ends up killing the Green Goblin in front of his own son. At least that is what everyone thinks, because actually Norman is alive, dyed his hair, and probably is pushing up daisies. Who knows, unfortunately this is the last episode. Harry, however, believes that his father died and creates hatred for Spidey, and despite the request to have broken up with Liz, leaving the girl with depression, Gwen Stacy cannot break up with Harry right after the supposed death of his father.
It is you who gives me strength, so I don't return to taking the globulin.
Another sad episode in Peter Parker's life, going to cry. The Spectacular Spider-Man is seen by the majority of fans as the best animated series of this character, and despite the cartoon having been successful, it was cancelled without quote-unquote an ending. And why? Obviously for contractual issues between Marvel, Disney, and Sony. Which is a pity, because this cartoon is really incredible. The way they balance Spidey's life with Peter, the way they develop and give special attention to all the characters, the fights, the comic moments, the serious moments, the way they give soul to all the characters, make, yes, the Spectacular Spider-Man be one of the best reincarnations of this character.